So I'm Brian Clarke, artist. This is Peter Cook, architect. And this is a little exhibition that covers close on 50 years and about 8 walls. I work in the kind of tradition of artists who are not confined to a single medium, and therefore work in a kind of broad range of activities, all of which are born out of drawing and painting, but find the most convincing expression probably in architecture.
He has tremendous fertility of mind, which means also fertility of the actual created object. And it ranges. I mean, you're now working in ceramics, for example. You work in dividing spaces, you work in translucent materials of every kind, not just sort of traditional old stained glass. And of course, he's a painter of extraordinary vigor, and his studio is just gobsmacking. It's you go in there and it's like in the best sense, a factory, but it's like a sort of factory it's almost like a sweet factory. There's so many amazing things coming out of every kind. It's like, they're just not making sherbets, they're not just making chocolate, they're making, candy bars, etc., etc., etc. And it's extraordinary. I'm very envious of his amazing productivity, but he's been like that for the 40 years that I've known him.
As an artist, drawing for me, line for me, is kind of fundamental substructure, the armature on which everything else kind of hangs. And sometimes one draws just because it's what one wants to do and it's the only thing that's sufficient to the moment. And at other times, it's a route to another experience. It's the kind of underlying structure upon which you hang everything else.
The drawing can depict a territory, it can depict a trajectory, it can hint at an object, it can even sometimes send strange signals which are almost sort of programmatic. It can be sinister, it can be wayward, it can be fluid, it can be neurotic.
When I was 12, I got a scholarship to art school in Oldham in Lancashire, and it was kind of a leftover tradition from the arts and crafts movement. And we were forced, as it were, it was part of the curriculum that you had to learn how to draw analytically. But we also had to have elocution lessons. But I did learn how to draw. I mean, but I never really developed a posh voice, as you may have noticed.
I was not a great drawer as a student. I found that one had to force oneself to draw what one intended by any means at all.
It's usually because I can't do anything else, really. It's not a sort of, there's nothing on the telly, so I'll do this. It's more, I can't help it, really. It's kind of like breathing. And the more you push it and the more you kind of, you're constantly finding things you can't do. And so you've got to tear away at the thing and keep going until you can do it. And I really won't let a drawing or a painting go until I've really flogged the hell out of it. I mean, it's got to be really rubbish for me to get rid of it. But sometimes you can turn the kind of most disastrous into something that has a structural substance. And you can't get that unless you really just keep going at it and keep going at it and tearing things away, removing things, and not being too frightened to ruin it. That's the big thing, really, not being so frightened that you might ruin something that's okay. Because it's very often that bit where you take the extra leap, where a mistake occurs or an accident occurs or nature just steps in and turns something that was worthy into something that's a bit more than that.
I think this institution is very interesting for me because I studied here when it was a very humble art school, and now doing my second building here, to see how it has metamorphosed. In the days when I was a student here, you would never have a big name from London exhibiting. You might have them once a month giving a rather formal lecture. And in this room, punches so far above its weight, it's extraordinary. And as does the institution. And it accepts sort of loony-looking buildings and weird stained glass artists and other phenomena and extraordinary people from the film world and the